Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Lexipol webinar, Navigating the Tech Landscape. We want to thank our sponsors for today's event, Utility. At this point, I would like to turn things over to our moderator, Charles Edwards from Jackson Spalding. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you very much, and welcome to you all for joining. We appreciate your time, and welcome to today's discussion, Navigating the Tech Landscape, Key Considerations for Adopting New Technology. As he said, my name is Charles Edwards, and I'm with Jackson Spalding, which is a communications agency in partnership with Utility. We provide facilitation services, which is why we are here moderating today's discussion. We are moderating on behalf of Utility, the innovative technology company that continually delivers groundbreaking digital systems for frontline professions that depend on speed, accuracy, easy to access data, and transparency in their work. In today's discussion, we'll draw upon results from the recent Lexipol Police One survey that sought to understand the key considerations on the mind of law enforcement when they're adopting new technology. In the survey, nearly 43% of respondents shared that their mindset when picking a technology solution is, we must bring best-in-class solutions to the critically important work of public safety. And we're going to build on that topic as we have our discussion today with two professionals who will bring real-life experiences and best practices to help agencies make informed decisions when they're choosing technology solutions and making those decisions by exploring certain factors as total cost of ownership, ease of use, innovation, and provider reputation. So with this in mind, we want to start today's discussion with a question for you. You're going to see the opportunity and have the opportunity to answer a poll question of the consideration factors mentioned. Which is most important to you? Is it total cost ownership? Is it ease of use? Is it innovation? Or is it provider reputation? And you see that poll on the slide. The poll is open, so we want you to select one of the four answers you see on the screen. Again, the question is, of the consideration factors mentioned, what is most important to you? Is it total cost ownership? Is it ease of use? Is it innovation? Or is it provider reputation? We'll pause now to give you a moment to answer, and then we'll come back and talk about the results along with introducing our panelists and a number of questions to help us begin the conversation. All right, so we know that some of you are still taking the poll. Please continue to do that. But of the people who have taken the poll so far, clearly ease of use is the most important consideration, coming in at 59%. Second to ease of use is total cost ownership at 29%. And then third is innovation with 12%. So again, ease of use, clearly the most important consideration based on all of you who took the poll, coming in at 59%. So thank you all for the insight by taking that poll. We're going to have some discussion about that in just a couple of moments. We have brought this group together today with one goal: to help you understand how to gain insight into each of these consideration sets. So with that, we want to meet our experts. And Chief Flynn, we'll start with you if you can give us a brief introduction.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, for wherever you are. My name is Brad Flynn. I am the Chief of Police for the Helena, Alabama Police Department. We're a suburb of Birmingham, and I have been active in law enforcement for a little over 29 years now. I've been chief for approximately 2.5. And during my career, I've been fortunate enough to work in several different specialty units and kind of get a good rounded idea of, if I ever did make chief, exactly what I would like my department or my agency to look like. And making these types of decisions were very important for me over the past several years as a new chief in bringing new technology in on board. So hopefully you guys can pick up a few things from some of the things I did right and some of the things I did wrong.
Well, Chief Flynn, thank you for that. I'm sure we'll be able to learn from a lot of the lessons you've got to share with us today. John, would love for you to introduce yourself to our panel.
Good morning, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Chief, it's a pleasure to be here with you as well. And Charles, thank you for facilitating today. My name is John Boyd, and I'm a recent retiree after 34 years in law enforcement. I served most recently as sheriff of LaPorte County in Northwest Indiana, which is just east of Chicago. We're about 60 minutes east of Chicago on the southern tip of Lake Michigan. During my career at the LaPorte County Sheriff's Office, I moved up through the ranks. I started as a patrol officer, deputy, went into our county schools where I served as a school resource officer and DARE and GREAT instructor. I was a squad sergeant. I was a detective sergeant. I was chief of detectives for our agency, promoted to major. And 9 years ago, I opted to run for sheriff, and we have term limits in Indiana. So when I served my 2 consecutive terms, it seemed logical to me that I would go to work for utility because it was the best partnership that we had. They made my life so much easier and more efficient, and they made the life of our staff much more efficient, and they enabled us to be transparent with the public that we served and the partnerships that we had. And so it's been a great marriage. I've been with the company since March.
Well, John, thank you for that introduction and giving us a sense of your background as well. Happy to have both of you here. Let's dive into the conversation. And first, I want to ask both of you, Chief Flynn, we'll start with you and then we'll go to you, John. When you see the results from our attendees to that first poll, what of all of those considerations is the most important one? Easily number one was ease of use with 59%. Chief Flynn, what was your reaction to the poll results?
I was not surprised. One of the factors that I take into consideration when I'm making equipment acquisitions for my agency is ease of use. Is it quote unquote cop friendly, so to speak? And that way I have a team of officers from different ranks that I'll bring in to test and evaluate whatever types of equipment that we're looking at and get their opinions, because if it's not easily used and functional for them in the field, what's even the point in purchasing it? So I believe they're spot on when it comes to making that kind of decision.
You use the phrase cop friendly. How do you define that? Is it basically you have your team that's going to be using it and you want them to test it? Is that what you mean by cop friendly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want them to put it through their paces. They're going to find some things that I won't find sitting in an office. I want them to get out and use it in all types of environments, and be honest with me. Give me critical feedback on what you do like, what you don't like, and then we can move forward from there. So that's been a great decision that we've made as a team here with my agency.
And John, we'll get to you in a second, but one follow-up for you, Chief Flynn. When your team is testing it to make sure that it's cop friendly, are there things that they're looking for, or does it change each and every time, or are there some consistent things that they're looking for in the technology?
Not really. It all just depends on exactly what we're evaluating. Like specifically when we were looking at utility in a partnership with them, not only did they have a lot of questions for the utility team, utility actually came to our agency, both the law enforcement rep and our sales rep flew in from out of state to sit down with us and demonstrate all the technology that was involved in their solution, and was able to answer every question that my team had, as well as questions that my elected officials had, because it was going to be a substantial partnership, and we wanted to make sure that we did it right. And utility set the bar high with that, and it made our decision that much easier.
And when you are, so John, I want to pick up here based on what Brad talked about, but first give me your reaction to the initial poll that we did, where 59% of the folks in attendance said ease of use is their number one consideration.
I'm really pleased with those results. Maybe a little surprised, because I know that chiefs and sheriffs oftentimes can really be tied to their budget, and budget is extremely important, but ease of use is very important, because if it's not easy to use, those out in the field are less likely to use it. They're less likely to get all of its capabilities out of it and use it properly. Again, budget is a concern, so I'm not surprised that it's number two. Perhaps I was a little surprised that it didn't have a greater percentage.
So, John, you've worked with a number of different law enforcement agencies in helping them select technology. You've been in their role of needing to select technology when you were in their position working with law enforcement agencies. How do most law enforcement agencies define ease of use?
Well, I think a lot of the questions that they ask are, what kind of a value are we attempting to get from the technology that we hope to acquire? So when you talk about value, you're talking about not creating more work for your officers in the field. In other words, you want to ease their efficiency, you want to streamline them, and you want to streamline the workflow as well, while helping to make them safe. So you need to find a solution that fits those needs and also helps simultaneously your agency meet their goals and the missions that they've set forth, and that the technology is going to help them in the long run. One of the last things that you want to do, and unfortunately my agency fell into this pitfall, was that years ago we went with a company in which we were spending an inordinate amount of money for overtime for officers to come in and download their footage. And that was counterproductive. As an administrator, I don't mind spending money on overtime, but I want to spend money on overtime when it's making a difference out in the field and it's helping to make communities safer, not when officers are coming in and being bogged down with technology and or paperwork. I want to keep them out in the field so they're visible and they can be reactive and they can be closer to calls for service.
I hear you talking about technology needs to help them do their jobs. It doesn't need to slow them down from doing their jobs.
Right.
So let's think about the second. If you go back to the poll results, again, ease of use was number one. Number two was total cost ownership. And so, John, wanted to get your reaction to total cost ownership being number two on the list for our attendees. And can you help define what total cost ownership means? And going back to what Chief Flynn said, he's got a team of folks that are evaluating. How do you evaluate total cost ownership?
Well, that's a good question. And one of the unique features of utility body-worn camera systems is the fact that it's not an ownership per se, it's a lease program, which enables you to more properly budget for it because you can create the type of lease program that works best for your budget, works best for your agency and for your community as well. And when we work with the budget, we are better at planning and enables you to plan ahead so you know exactly what those costs are going to be. It also spells everything out with the lease contract so you know exactly what you're getting. And with utility, it provides you with 24/7 support, and it provides you with the ability to plan for your future. And it also provides for real-time updates that we may have if there's an upgrade with our technology for you to automatically get those advances when you enter into that lease and you enter into a partnership with utility.
Chief Flynn, John talked about how you can define ease of use, and he mentioned you want to know what's going to work best for your agency and for your budget. Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that elected officials are asking questions about this as well. So what kind of considerations are you thinking about, Chief Flynn, because you know that elected officials are also going to want to know about the technology you're purchasing too?
Well, they're going to have questions from their civilian objective, and plus they're the ones who are responsible for the financial status of our city. So they're going to have some questions, and it's my responsibility to give them as many factual answers as I possibly can. And especially when we're dealing, like when we were dealing with our considering utility. They couldn't wrap their head around the initial thought of, we will not own this, that this will be a lease type of an agreement. And because previously most of our city's purchases have been, quote, purchase to own. And once they understood the benefits of this, the benefits of the advancement in technology along with the service and everything else, and it would be a 5-year agreement. It opened up a lot of their perspective on things, and it allowed them to understand the importance of this. And I think they saw that value immediately, especially when you're looking at the service as well as the updates in technology, because we all know something comes out today, it's obsolete in a month. There's always something better, but with this agreement with utility, we are constantly getting any new updates that may be coming out, and they really enjoyed knowing that we would be receiving that.
I think to piggyback on what Chief Flynn has said, our agency, several sheriffs prior to me taking office, we entered into an agreement with an in-car camera provider. The installers came out, installed the equipment, and literally the day after they left and they were installed in all of our vehicles, the company went bankrupt. So as technology, as with any form of technology, there are issues that come up, and we found that the equipment was proprietary, so no one would come and work on it. We purchased the equipment outright, and when the system started to fail, we had no choice but to remove those systems from our cars, and they sat in crates, and they were of absolutely no value to us. There was no way that we could get rid of them other than for scrap, and that was a real issue. What's unique and what I found very beneficial with utility is if we had issues with technology, and you're going to have issues with technology, there were no problems, no questions when we returned the items, or oftentimes it was just a matter of getting on the 24/7 support line, and they were able to troubleshoot remotely the issues that we had. And I'll tell you, it's really nice when you reach out to support and they answer the phone, regardless of when the issue occurs. They're located in the headquarters of utility in our Decatur office, and they're very attentive to the needs of the clients that we have. It's not well, I'll leave a message and they'll call me back during normal working hours. We know, I think Chief, you'll agree, when a technology fails, it rarely fails Monday afternoon at 1 o'clock. It's usually Monday morning at 1 o'clock in the morning or a Saturday night. And it's nice to reach out and have someone answer the phone on the other end and be attentive to the needs and the issues that you're having.
So, John, let's build upon this for a second, because Chief Flynn talked about the importance of having conversations with elected officials, because they too are a part of the decision-making process, and they're thinking about money and this idea of ownership versus leasing. It sounds like for elected officials, they're looking at it from the standpoint of, if we're making a significant purchase for a law enforcement agency, we feel like we should own it. And there's a little bit of a security that comes with the peace of mind of owning something. But it sounds like you all are having to explain to them the difference between, or the benefit of, leasing versus owning. How do you speak to that concern that, how do you speak to that concern that elected officials have? I imagine some of our panelists or some of our attendees may have to speak to that very thing when they're talking to their elected officials about these purchases.
Well, I think the bottom line is bang for the buck, and what we had explained earlier, and that is, if you own a piece of equipment and it fails on you, what do you do with it? It's like flushing money down the drain when you have a piece of technology and you own it and there's nothing that can be done with it. You can't necessarily send it back because it's yours. It's nice when you're in a lease program and you have an issue and you're able to get online support, or you're able to send a failed piece of equipment back and you get an immediate return on it within several days, and you're able to get that deputy or that officer back online with the technology that they need to help them do their job. So really, when you explain it in those terms to the budget arm of your local government, I think that they understand. And the bottom line is, a chief or a sheriff has been trusted to make those decisions and do that type of research, and then make their recommendation to that funding arm of a local government. And oftentimes we find that local government trusts the research and the recommendation that's been done. And if the chief is fine with it, the sheriff is fine with it, then oftentimes the budgetary arm is fine with it as well.
So Chief Flynn, let's go back to you. You actually lived this out, and you heard from elected officials in the beginning who were a little concerned that they weren't going to own such a purchase and an investment like this. Once it was explained to them, what was the reaction you got from elected officials?
It was enormously positive. I'll be honest with you, when I brought my mayor in and he actually put on the vest with the body cam system in it, and they went through the paces of demonstrating the officer safety capabilities and things like that. And when he saw that, and especially when we were talking about value and how do we equate that, and when he saw that, and in addition to the fact of, hey, they've got the service down, they've got the updates, anything that we will need, we can send back. We don't, it's a one-time price. We know what we're going to be paying. He was sold immediately, and that made my job that much easier, but it also made him feel a little bit better in signing off on this type of solution.
Service updates and price. Want to remind people that the name of this conversation is Navigating the New Tech Landscape, a guide to adopting the right solutions for your law enforcement agency. We're joined by Chief Flynn and John Boyd from Utility. While you are watching this panel discussion, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. As soon as you ask your question, we're going to review it and ask it to our panelists to make sure that we're getting answers to the questions that you have. So as soon as you have a question or a comment you'd like to make, please feel free to drop it into the chat function of this meeting platform, and then we'll review it and make sure that we ask those questions as soon as you send them to us. So we've talked a lot about the top considerations, how you go through the process, what you're thinking about when you're making these decisions. Let's talk about referrals or references from peer agencies when you're considering new technology. Chief Flynn, if you get a referral, then that's a really good sign. Hey, I should consider this. But when you get that referral, what are the steps you're taking to even review a piece of technology that you get as a referral from a fellow agency?
I want to know the good and the bad. Don't tell me what's just great about the product. Tell me things that maybe don't live up to your expectations. I want to make a very objective analysis of something like this, and especially when we're dealing with technology. And that type of decision is very important for any agency. And so when I call or if I'm asking references, I've had several friends in other states that had partnered with Utility, and I reached out to them, and it was a consistent, this is the best decision that we've made. This product has excelled above and beyond what we thought it would be. This truly has been the best solution for us. And these came from chiefs and sheriffs that I knew, and as well as people that I did not know. And I think that made it that much more objective for us to be able to, because I knew that if they weren't happy with this solution, that I wanted to know about it. And not one of them told me that they had any type of solution that could not, or issue that had come up with their partnership with Utility that could not be corrected within 24 hours. And that gave me a lot of peace of mind as well, because this solution, the transparency that it provides, but it's more than just that body cam system, that officer down capability. My officers' lives depend on this equipment. So it was a decision that I wanted to make sure I got it right the first time.
Chief Flynn, I want to follow up on that with another question here. Over half of the survey respondents shared that they would like to see technology at another agency firsthand and be able to ask questions through that evaluation process. Is that something that you do with your agency? What sort of, if you do, what sort of insights are you able to get from going to their agency and seeing it firsthand?
Absolutely. I've had several fellow chiefs that have come here to see how we have our system set up and see if it fit for them. And they asked the exact same questions that I asked several years ago when I was looking at Utility. And it's good for them to be able to see it. And I see that benefit of when they show up, and it's easy for me to describe it to them over the phone or say, hey, this is a really neat thing that it'll do. But when they see that firsthand, and it's a tangible thing that they can touch and see how how it enhances their technology, their transparency, and their officer safety. It's a win-win for everybody, and both of the agencies that have been by recently to see our system have gotten on board with utility.
John, I want to bring you back into the conversation here. You see things from both sides. You've been a sheriff. You also are now serving in this role as utility. As a sheriff, you were making these considerations, and as someone in utility now, you're helping people, you're helping agencies and sheriffs to make these considerations. When you think about your combined experience on both sides, what are the top 3 considerations that you see agencies making most often before they make a purchase like this?
I think they're looking to improve their efficiency. I think they're looking to improve the morale of the rank and file. I think that they're looking to improve transparency and within their community that they serve. And I think a number of them are hoping to come in line with the 6 pillars of the 21st century policing module. And so I think there are a number of factors that go into this. And that's what's unique about utility is the features that we have that help agencies to accomplish these goals. And I go back to, again, and there was a recent study that was commissioned by the University of Chicago in which they talked about the value of body-worn cameras. And they said that the cost compared to the value and what is achieved from going to a body-worn camera is 5 to 1, which is really remarkable. So the bottom line, that study indicates that it is money well spent and agencies are getting a return on the investment that they make. And that's something important to look at in what agencies look at as well before they enter into any type of buying agreement with a provider.
John, you mentioned improve efficiency, improve morale, and improve transparency. I want to ask you about efficiency and transparency in a moment. But the improved morale part, that might be a little surprising to people. You said that a top consideration law enforcement agencies are thinking about when making these types of investments is they want to improve morale. Help us understand the tie between making a technology purchase and morale improving.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of different levels. Everything from it improves morale because unfortunately in the society in which we live today, there are a number of complaints that are made about our officers and our deputies that are out in the field. And this is an accurate portrayal of exactly what happened during an interaction with the public and the officer or the deputies. And I found, and many of the agencies that I'm talking to, is that about 98% of the complaints that are received are absolutely frivolous. And the way that agencies are able to determine that is by looking at the in-car camera or the body-worn footage from the officer that gives a perspective exactly from the officer's point of view. That builds morale because oftentimes when frivolous complaints are made, an officer will second guess himself or herself and think, what did I possibly do wrong? How can this person be making a complaint like this? And it can be very damaging for a career and for morale as well. And when an administration can actually look at the footage and see that that deputy or that officer did absolutely nothing wrong, that goes a long way to improving morale. It can also improve morale within an agency because it makes the job of the investigator, the deputy, the officer so much more efficient. They're not bogged down with having to classify videos with our system, classify their encounters. There can be a CAD activation. There can be an activation. We have a number of triggers with our body-worn cameras that take the decision out of the hands of the responding deputy or the officers, which is very, very beneficial. We've all seen those situations that make national news in which there's a use of force and the officer, the deputy had a body camera, but it wasn't activated. Or the camera was activated and it gets ripped from the officer, so it's not giving an accurate depiction of exactly what took place. And it's really demoralizing. It causes the public and it causes the media to say, wait a minute, this officer and this deputy had a camera system and it wasn't activated. There must be something nefarious here. We live in a society, unfortunately, where more and more where officers are painted as the villain and the perpetrator is is portrayed as the victim, and the perpetrator is portrayed as the person that did everything right, and the officer is portrayed as the person who did everything wrong. But when we have digital evidence that we can provide to the public, that we can provide to the courts, it can actually take that guesswork or that innuendo or supposition away, and that goes a long way to improving the morale of our current law enforcement staffs. Excuse me.
John, thank you for breaking that down. Chief Flynn, have you seen that? John talked about the 3 things that agencies are considering. They want to improve efficiency, morale, and transparency. How long have you had the technology, and have you seen improvements in any of those areas?
We've had the utility solution on board with us for a little over 2 years now. And I'll echo everything that John said, especially as far as looking at it from an administrative point of view. But one of the things that we've noticed is not only does it enhance morale, it is actually a recruitment and retention tool for us in a way that we're the only agency in the surrounding area that has this type of an advanced solution. And especially considering where we came from with our previous body cam solution, which was absolutely abhorrent and terrible in every possible way, it shows our officers that we're willing to invest time and the money to find the system that's not only going to be there to back them up, but it's also going to actually help protect them. And when these officers see that, they're proud, and they feel like, okay, my agency has my back, and I know I have a system that if I need help, they can get me help, very easily. Well, they go out and talk to their friends and who are working for agencies that do not have this type of technology, and they're like, well, my agency must not really care that much about me, because they've got us with this low bid contract body cam system that's constantly failing and has no other officer safety capability. So we've seen, in addition to that morale, it's actually been a recruitment and a retention tool for us. So, and that's something that I did not anticipate. But in the day of this day and age where we're fighting over officers because nobody wants to do this job anymore, I'll take any edge I can get.
Chief Flynn, thank you for that. I've got a follow-up for you as well, but first want to remind our viewers of our panel discussion that the title of this is Navigating the New Tech Landscape, a guide to adopting the right solutions for your law enforcement agency. As you're watching this panel discussion right now, we would absolutely love to hear from you. If you have a question about how you're trying to navigate this new tech landscape, if you're trying to think about what are the considerations that you want to make sure you have top of mind as you're making these purchasing decisions, please drop your question into the chat, and we'll ask it to our panel as soon as you drop that question in. So again, you can use the question function or the chat function on this platform and make sure that you ask your question. And as soon as you do, we will throw it to our panel of experts to make sure that you get an answer right away. So Chief Flynn, you were talking a little bit about morale, how it's tied to this. One of the things that John talked about was improving efficiency. And as we've talked about throughout our conversation, technology changes over time, things change, and you want to make sure that the technology is keeping pace with the evolving needs that you have for your agency. What are some of the ways that you are able to learn more about a vendor's commitment to innovation so that they can make sure that they're keeping up with the times?
I'm going to do my homework. You can't just make a decision based off a handshake and a 5-minute conversation that you may have at a vendor fair at a conference. It's up to you to do your research, make some phone calls, do some internet sleuthing, and find out exactly who this company is, what they represent, why are they in this business? Are they in this truly just to make money, or do they actually care? Do they put the lives of the officers first? And with utility, it didn't take long for me to realize that this was a company that not only was in it for the right reasons, but was going to stand by us and walk us through from the installation, because when they lay everything out, I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a logistical nightmare. They come in when their staff came in to equip all of our vehicles and to do all of our in-service training. it was just, I was blown away by them coming in and doing that. And I knew that they would do that from my research, but it's just very important that you do dig and you do ask the right questions, and you can do that when you speak with other people that may have that same solution as well.
Chief, I think to your point, that's reminds me that's a good reason that utility has a 98% retention rate with existing clients, is because they're extremely satisfied. And we know oftentimes those of us in emergency services are very difficult to satisfy. And I think that speaks for itself.
Absolutely.
So John, Chief Flynn talked about you've got to do your homework. You've got to ask questions. What are some of the questions that you all get at utility around innovation and making sure that technology is up to date? And how do you try to have those conversations with law enforcement agencies?
Well, every agency has different questions. Every agency has different concerns. Everything from, is it server-based? Is it cloud-based? And utility is cloud-based. It's CJIS compliant. It's encrypted. Some agencies are fearful that someone's going to be able to hack into the government cloud and be able to take this information. And utility treats it as secure digital evidence. And we know how important evidence is for law enforcement. It's one of the first things that the defense will go after when it comes to trial purposes. They always are looking at the evidence and trying to impugn that. So we have secure evidence. That's really important for agencies. The officer safety features that we have are extremely important for agencies. The chief touched on that. As a law enforcement administrator, I wanted to make the job easier for deputies and take the responsibility of remembering to activate their cameras out of their hands, because we know in law enforcement, then when a critical incident happens, oftentimes it happens very, very rapidly. And I don't want a deputy to have to worry about activating his or her camera. I wanted to make sure that that camera activated on its own. And when it did activate, it had a pre-record feature, which utilities body cameras have on it. So it can capture those moments that may lead up to what caused that immediate escalation. That's very important. Things like an accelerometer, because it's not uncommon for those of us in law enforcement to be speaking with someone and it turns adversarially very quickly, and that person starts to flee or a weapon is drawn. And as soon as that deputy or that officer starts to run, they don't have to think about activating their camera. Perhaps it was geofenced, so it was already activated. Perhaps it had a trigger in the system, which we offer, that was activated when red lights come on, or a door opens, or a patrol rifle comes out of its carrier, or it activated by taser. But oftentimes it happens so quickly that you want to make sure that those triggers are there so it can capture the incident in its totality. Another important feature that law enforcement administrators look for is our officer down feature. And that is, if heaven forbid an officer or deputy goes down and they're prone, it will automatically send an alert not only to the dispatch center, but to all the other officers and deputies that are in the area, and it will give them GPS locations as to where that officer is, because sometimes things evolve so rapidly that an officer doesn't have time to get on the radio and call for help. So when they go down, we provide turn-by-turn directions to exactly where they're located. The other thing that's important is you don't have to worry about the camera being ripped off of your officer or your deputy and taken by an assailant. That the camera is embedded in the uniform that the officer or the deputy is wearing, and it is downloaded to the cloud as it's evolving. So it helps to keep that evidence secure.
Chief Flynn, John just talked about a number of things embedded in the utility technology that's provided to law enforcement agencies. What's your reaction to some of those in terms of the importance for you and your agency and other agencies?
Well, there again, when I first started speaking with utility and they're telling me all the benefits of the system and what the technology can do and what we can do on the administrative end with AvailWeb and everything, I was like, I'm a little skeptical. I mean, as cops, we tend to be that way. And it didn't take long, especially after that meeting that we had when they came in town, just just to sit with us. It wasn't about getting any other clients on board. They just came in to sit down and answer our questions. When I saw all of that, and plus a body cam solution that was already head and shoulders above anything else that was available on the market, especially what we had been with prior, and that's the service that went along with it. It was just a no-brainer for us. It was one of those things I said, there's got to be a catch here. This system is too good to be true, because I'm getting all these officer safety capabilities as well as the video and the audio. But I tell you, in 2 years, they have not failed my agency yet.
When you talk with other law enforcement agencies, Chief Flynn, I imagine they share initial skepticism about a lot of different things, because you want to make sure you're making a solid decision. What are some of the things you hear from them in terms of, I don't know about that, I'm feeling skeptical?
Well, essentially, most of the skepticism that I receive is that it's essentially a cell phone. It's a cell phone. It's an Android-based system that's essentially in a cell phone-sized unit that is clipped inside their shirt, and they're like, oh, there's no way. This is, you've got to have a big hockey puck on the front of your shirt that has a 30-pound magnet on it, and looks terrible in a uniform, because I'm one of those people who I like my guys to look spit and polished, and I was never a fan of having them on the outside just for the looks, not only the fact of, like John had touched on before, every time you get into a fight, the things are going to get ripped off. It doesn't matter how heavy the magnet is. But when they saw the actual product, they're like, oh, there's no way. And then when I would explain to them, in the few that have come by and they've seen the quality of the video as well as the technology that goes in on a VeilWeld and everything else, their minds are just blown. And that's where I believe that utility really sets itself apart. And it's something that I'm very proud to be a part of that team.
John, when you think about some of that skepticism and some law enforcement agency members saying, this sounds like a cell phone clipped onto a shirt, I mean, how do you respond to something like that to educate people about it?
Well, I think just having a conversation and talking about its capabilities goes a long way. The experience that I have, the testimonials that we can come along with, oftentimes the best testimonials come from colleagues, and that's why it's important to roundtable. And that's why it's important to interact with other chiefs and sheriffs to find out, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, so you can see some of the best practices. I think the chief is exactly right. I think the major stumbling block is the fact that it is a cell phone. And when you talk about its capabilities and how it can ease the efficiency and streamline the workflow, I think that just goes a long way.
So, John, you mentioned roundtable and having colleagues at the table, having these discussions. Earlier in our conversation, Chief Flynn talked about making sure that he had a team that's actually able to vet the product, vet the technology, because they're going to be using the technology in the field. I wanted to discuss that for a second, because this whole idea of identifying who within the agency will be doing the evaluation. John, you work with a bunch of different agencies. What advice would you give to folks who haven't made these technology purchases yet, who should be in that buying committee?
Well, that's a really good question, but it comes down to department size. If it's a three-man department, it's very difficult to have 7 people at the table. However, a medium to larger size table, I would suggest that those involved in the conversation certainly be someone who has budgetary responsibilities. Certainly someone from an IT department would be very helpful. I would say perhaps a PIO should be at the table as well, so they know what the capabilities and what exactly an agency is looking for, so they can relate to the media, which is a means to be able to relate with the public. I think it would be important to have, say, an FTO coordinator there as well, because the FTO coordinator is going to know exactly what is going on in the field, and they're going to know what is needed and how this technology is working and how it can benefit the officers and the deputies that are out in the field. So, you know, the discussion can have as many as 5 to 7 individuals there. And then once you near a consensus, I think it's important to pull someone in from your unit of government that perhaps is a liaison to a council or a commission, so that they can help to advocate for you as well. It's important to find, for lack of a better term, a sponsor in your local government, and most agencies have a liaison. It's important that they are behind you, they support you, so they can help to sell this as well.
Chief Flynn, I heard John talk about 4 roles there for that budget committee: a budget role, an IT person, PIO, FTO coordinator, and then he talked about having someone from, you know, council, you know, being that conduit between your agency and elected officials. How does that compare, contrast to the committee that you put together to evaluate the technology?
It's very similar. We're a mid-sized agency, and so I thought it relevant to have 2 different patrol officers, one from our day watch and one from our night watch, as well as 2 patrol supervisors and my administrative and operations lieutenants who will be using them on a daily basis, and getting them involved and letting them see, because they're the ones that if we do get a complaint that comes in, they're going to be the sergeants, and the lieutenants are going to be the one that are going to be looking into it and obtaining that video and everything else. And I also went a step above and brought our detectives in, because we issue these cameras to our detectives, and they have them on when they first respond to a crime scene. It's another a point of view that we could use as far as the criminal investigation goes. So I like to have their input, as well as John mentioned, our council liaison. We have a law enforcement liaison on our council, and he is the one that I'm putting a bug in his ear first, going, hey, Chris, this is something that I really believe in. This is something that I think it's worth our time. It's worth a good look. And like John mentioned, having that advocacy in your corner, it goes a long way when the council may be having other questions, when that law enforcement liaison, my liaison, can answer the question before I can.
So for folks watching this discussion, we're talking about navigating the new tech landscape, a guide to adopting the right solutions for your law enforcement agency. John Boyd and Chief Flynn has been giving us a lot of great information to help us think about who should be at the table evaluating, what they should consider when they're evaluating, and talking about ease of use, ownership, and innovation along some other topics. If you have any questions for John Boyd or Chief Flynn, please drop them into the chat and we'll ask those questions as soon as you send them our way. We want to make sure that this is helpful and effective for you, so make sure you think about the questions you want to ask. We've got about 12 minutes left in our conversation, so before we end, we want to make sure that we get to your questions and make sure that we get answers to those questions as soon as we can. So Chief Flynn, you were talking about, you know, lieutenants, sergeants, detectives. You also mentioned day watch and night watch. Do you find that there's different things that your folks need depending on what aspect of the agency they represent?
Yes, especially the difference in day shift and night shift officers. Is it easily accessible and easily used in the dark when there's a low light situation? Is this something they're going to have to look down with to fiddle with switches to make sure this works or that doesn't work? Is it going to work in the rain? Is it going to work in the snow? So because policing on day shift versus night shift, there are subtle differences in what they require equipment wise, and I want to make sure that we're meeting the needs and the standards that both of them expect to receive from the administration. So that was a decision that I was very glad that we did make, because we got a lot of questions that just me, and especially the admin bureau, we wouldn't have even remotely thought of these questions or concerns if it wasn't for their input.
I know, Chief Flynn, that John also mentioned IT as a part of this, along with the PIO. Are there other folks that you would recommend bringing in, like an IT department, things of that nature?
Absolutely. We have a contract IT department, and one of the calls I made after I decided I knew that this was the decision that, or this was the solution that we were going to go with, was I contacted our IT rep and had a sit down with him, and I had all the specs and everything from utility, and said, this is what we're going to be installing, not just on each officer, but in all of our cars with the Rocket modems and everything else, and made sure that, number one, that it was going to be, everything was going to click, and number two, that he understood the importance of this and how I need him to be there with us when we're making these installations. And if we have questions or the utility team has questions, that I have IT readily available. And John also mentioned the PIOs. I will mention that once we made the decision to go with utility, I actually did a media release on it, and had an incredibly positive reaction from the local media, because when they saw all the technology that this would do, this wasn't just a body cam, but it's a total officer safety solution. And then the reaction we received from our community, that we're making these extra initiatives to stay transparent, but we also place the value of our officers even higher. That was a benefit that I couldn't even begin to have expected.
So communicating to the media, communicating to the community about these purchasing decisions plays a big role, it sounds like.
Absolutely. I want the community to know where their money is going, how it's being used within the department. We've done that with several large purchases, and we want them to know that we have the most advanced technology, not only protecting them and serving them, but protecting and serving our officers as well.
Chief Flynn, earlier in our conversation, you alluded to the fact that you hope people learn from what have been successes, but also some things you've learned along the way that maybe you would take back if you had a do-over sort of opportunity. We've been talking a lot about best practices today, but I wonder if you could share a moment from your experience of, you made a decision with the best intentions, but then realized later on maybe it wasn't the right decision. Anything that you could share from that standpoint in terms of lessons learned for the audience?
Yeah, I learned real quick that I don't know anything about drones. And I met a very nice gentleman at a conference several years ago, and we talked about a lot of things, and he was just hitting all the bells and whistles that I thought that we needed, because we were looking for a drone. And I came back, I was ready to pull the trigger on this. I'd already gone to the mayor, and I got with our existing drone team, and I was so excited. Hey guys, look what I found. And I slid it in front of them, and they looked at it, and they looked up at me and like, Chief, really? This is in no way what we need. And that's when I realized, and that was early on with me being a chief, I realized, okay, I need to have people on board to educate me along the way. I'm not, just because I'm sitting in the big chair does not I don't know everything, and I don't know what they need. And that was a lesson learned. Thankfully, it was before we signed any contracts with them. But I learned really quick that I value the input and the opinion of my team, and it's something that we put into every major technology purchase.
So I imagine some folks in your position may think, well, if I'm in this position, I have to make the decision. You may make a final call or a final recommendation, but it's not about you vetting this all by yourself, bringing the right people to the table to help you make the decision.
Exactly. I want this to be a true team effort, and make sure that everybody's on board. We've evaluated all the possible options that we have available to us, and that we agree this is what will work for us. I don't want the most expensive solution on the market. I don't want the cheapest solution on the market. I want the best solution on the market that works for my agency. And with utility, it checked off all those boxes.
John, I want to go to you. When you think back to your time as a sheriff, is there something you didn't know then that you're like, man, now that you reflect on it, you're like, man, I wish I knew this when I was a sheriff making these kinds of decisions?
Yeah, but really it came as a result of partnering with utility. We were with a body camera company prior to that, and they simply did not deliver on any of the promises that they had made. Now, fortunately, that company acknowledged that, and at our insistence, we shipped the technology, the equipment back, and we got a complete refund, and then we invested in utility. But I wish that I had done more research and wasn't merely checking a box to say, yeah, we've got body cameras. I wish that I would have viewed it initially more as an investment and something that would pay off. So I think looking back, if I could go back in time and change things, that would be it. I wouldn't have merely asked other agencies, what camera company do you have? That's in reality, that's what I was doing. I wasn't asking about their successes or the failures or their recommendations. I merely was asking, what company are you with? And that kind of drove our decision making. And it was only after that failure that we had with the first company where we transitioned to utility that I began asking those really in-depth questions, doing my research. And I researched it as if I was investing my personal money into something. I wanted to make sure I got a good return that was reliable and that was money well spent.
Well, John, Chief Flynn, we've got about 4 minutes left here. I'd love to get some closing thoughts from you all as we wrap up our discussion here today. John, I'll start with you, and then Chief Flynn will go to you. John, when you think about the law enforcement folks who are watching this call, we've talked about a lot of information today, but how would you summarize it for people? What are some key next steps that they can think about when it comes to either making these purchases, evaluating their purchases, and the steps they need to take moving forward?
Well, I think what's really important is to do your research and get a group of trusted decision makers together within your agency. Reach out for testimonials from other agencies and find out what their recommendations are, their findings. As Chief Flynn pointed out, not only ask for the successes, but ask for some of the failures as well. Find out what they're getting, the value that they're getting from the investment that they've made. And again, view your purchase of your body camera as an investment, and it should serve multiple purposes. It should improve the efficiency and the morale of your agency and also improve officer safety.
John, thank you for that. Chief Flynn, same final question for you, for your peers who are on this meeting, listening, taking notes. What are some final thoughts you can leave with them as they're making these kinds of decisions?
Well, I'll echo everything that John said. I mean, he hit the nail on the head on all those. The one thing that I would remind my fellow law enforcement executives, when you're making these decisions, understand the significance of not only the internal reactions and effects that this purchase will make, but the external ones, meaning in the community. And especially with this utility, the solution that we went with, utility, it was not only was it an instant morale booster, an officer safety thing for our officers, but the public saw that as, like I said before, us maintaining that commitment to transparency, as well as ensuring that we were serving them with the best equipment possible. So that's something that I would encourage them to look at it in an objective way sometimes, and not just as a chief, but as look at it from somebody off the street. How would I react if another officer came up to me and said, "Hey, this is the solution I have"? How would I feel about it?
Well, Chief Flynn, John Boyd, thank you very much for all the information you shared with our audience today. We really appreciate your insight, and we want to thank you all in attendance for being here for today's webinar. If you have a follow-up question based on the information that we talked about today, please email us and we will definitely respond to you. We'll get that email to you. To each of our experts participating today and for sharing your insight, thank you very much. It's an invaluable resource for those listening and watching as well. We're going to share a recap of this conversation, a recap and video, so be on the lookout for that as well. And we also want to make sure that you take the survey because we do welcome your feedback. So on behalf of the entire team at Utility, thank you for making time to join us. Stay well. We hope to see you at our next webinar event. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.